Welcome back to the channel, YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be doing a shock upgrade on the Axial SCX24 Jeep Wrangler. So if you've been following along with the build, you know in the previous episode I added all these scale accessories to the Jeep. And in doing that, I unintentionally added too much rear weight to the Jeep. So as you can see, the fender gap right here is a lot smaller than the fender gap up here. So that is an issue because it does rub. So we are going to upgrade the shocks today by replacing the springs and filling the shocks with a grease. And we also are going to do a shock relocation. So that's the main point of the video, to show you how to relocate the shocks on the frame. But in doing so, since we have the shocks off, we're also going to switch the springs out. So now that we have the wheels and tires and the body off the SCX24, we're going to remove the shocks. So there are 2 points where these shocks are mounted. So the top point up here on the rear is this shock tower up top, and then it's going to be right here on the axle down below. And then up front, it's also a shock tower right up here, and then down below, right behind the steering knuckle, it's located on the axle. So with our Wera 1.3 hex, if you'd like to check it out, it's in the description below. With our Wera, we're gonna undo both those screws on all 4 corners of the truck. Okay. Okay, so now that all 4 of the shocks are moved off the SCX24, I always like to say that this feels like it's a dead body now. It just feels so lifeless without that spring. So now that we have all the shocks off, we're gonna put those to the side. And we are first gonna look at the shock towers, okay? So the shock tower is held in by these 2 screws on the frame. So there's 1 screw here, 1 screw there that holds the shock tower to the frame. And then we mount the shock to the shock tower through this little hole. So that's that. So when relocating the shocks, I like to remove this screw right here that's in the frame, and I like to move that screw. You can either put to the side, or you can screw it in like I like to do, back to the shock tower. So that's where I relocate the shock and the shock tower mounting points. So now when I put the shock back on, I'm going to mount it to this point on the frame that also goes through the shock tower, and that'll give us whatever room that was from this point to that point. So that's a little bit more added height that you'll put on your SCX24. And so I like to do the same exact thing up front, or actually it's a little bit different. So up front, I like to relocate this little screw that holds in the ESC. I take that screw out and I move that screw to the shock tower, and then I screw the shock in to the ESC mount on the frame. So yeah, it's pretty simple. I'm gonna grab it, screw this screw into the shock tower. Really, you don't have to screw the screw from the frame into the shock tower. I just do it because it's a really simple thing, and it's one less thing I have to organize in my toolbox. Alright, so that's out of the way. The shock relocation stuff, we're gonna put that to the side. And now we're gonna mess with these shocks. So when disassembling the shock, I just hold it right here, and I just kind of lefty-loosey it. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. And because we are gonna replace this spring with the silver hot racing spring, you want to compress the spring, then up top your 1.3 hex is going to appear, and you simply just undo it, and then this little screw will pop out, and that's kind of the base of the shock, and then your shock comes apart. So it comes in the screw, the spring, the top of the shock, and the bottom part of the shock. So it comes in 4 pieces. So now I'm just going to get our black spring, move it to the side, and then I'm gonna grab our silver spring, and we're gonna reassemble the shock. So that goes in there. How do I do this? I like to put this in first, top of the shock, put it through the body of the shock. Let's see if I can get it. There's that. Get my screw, push it down. Get my spring, sandwich it, and then relocate it to the bottom part of the shock. when you tighten these little parts, you gotta be very careful not to over tighten anything. That's about right. And now we've replaced our spring. And then I'm just gonna grab some of our 1-Up gold grease right here. I used this in a previous video. Check it out, it'll be right there. And we're just gonna fill it as much as we can. This grease, I believe it does kind of seep through the bottom of the shock. I kind of had an issue with it, just kind of cleaned it up with a rag once I saw it seeping out. But I do believe quite a bit of it stays in there. So it's worth it to me. I'm just gonna load it up with some grease. As much as we can there. And then we're just gonna grab the top of our shock and screw it back on. So if you have extra springs lying around, it's a pretty easy mod. If you have some kind of grease lying around, you can fill up your shock with it, wouldn't hurt. So there are a little bit of bubbles in there, but I just kind of like to compress it a couple times. No biggie. You can hear it farting a little bit. But yeah, so now this is our modified shock compared to our stock shock. So there is really no recoil at all right here, and now there's a little bit. So that was definitely an upgrade in my eyes. So now we have to repeat this process 3 more times. And so this was an upgrade I did pretty much for free with spare parts. So yeah, so now it's time to move to the body, or actually the frame of the SCX24. So I have no preference in which direction I like the shock to go in. So here is the front of the truck. I believe, actually I do. I like this part of the shock facing the back part of the truck. So we're gonna grab the top part up here, top mounting point, and we are now gonna move it to, not the shock tower up here. We're gonna move it to the part on the frame, so the part that connects the frame to the shock tower, and we're pretty much gonna screw it in there now. Don't want to over tighten it, and then we're just gonna screw it into the same point on the axle because there's not really another location that we can change it to. Grab it, little hole down there. Screwed in there. So as you can see, we moved the location from up here to down here. So that's gonna give us just a little bit more room on the height, on the right height of the truck. And that should help out with that little fender rub that we were seeing earlier. I'm just gonna do the same thing on the rear. So now we're gonna mount the shock to the front half of the truck. So here is the original shock tower point on the truck, and now we're moving it down here to the ESC and where the frame meet. So this point is not vertically in line with the original shock tower location. So it may look a little bit weird, but trust me, it works out fine. I've done it on plenty of my other SCX24s. And then we're just gonna put it on its point on the axle. Right there. We're gonna screw it in. So now it's more tilted back, I guess. It's kind of leaned back instead of straight up like it would be like this. Now it's kind of like that. But I haven't really seen a negative effect when doing that. So I'd rather prefer the ride height raise versus where it was originally. So I'm just gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I don't know if you can tell, but it is a dramatic difference. I kind of messed up because I didn't get a before picture, but before I could barely stick the head of this screwdriver underneath this fender and this wheel gap, and now there's probably a whole 3/4 of an inch, maybe even an inch of room from the fender to the top of this tire. So moving the shock location really does help out. The springs and the fluid now don't make the truck so bobbly. So overall, this was a success. This costed me no money whatsoever. I always recommend that you save all of your old parts. You may never know if you might need some springs like I did. So never throw anything away. I always want to say that with everything in life, with bike parts, car parts, RC parts, anything like that. But the results are astonishing. I'm definitely liking how this is now. And so the truck doesn't look like it's so slanted towards the back, which is good. So let's take it to the Impala and see how it performs. Say hey, Monday. Say what's up. Say what's up, viewers. What's up? Smell the camera. Yeah. You ready to see this crawl? He's ready. So in the previous video, we had some troubles on tipping over coming up here. So let's see how this goes this time. Okay, we made it up pretty clean. Let's try it going back again this way. Let's go over Mexico. It's a map of Mexico. So let's go back on up. Let's not step on this guy. Come on over this towel. Woohoo! One more time, coming on up. I know we had troubles right here last time. Same troubles. So it's still a little bit too heavy in the back. Of course, all that 3D plastic back there. But we're definitely going in the right direction for this build. So now that tells me that I need to put weight up front to keep the front end down. So that will be the next step. But I'm pretty impressed with that mod we did. I can totally fit my finger in here now, and I definitely could not do that before. So I call that a success in my book. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. Hopefully you learned how to disassemble a shock, add some ride height to your SCX24, and relocate the shock tower points. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.